Good afternoon. My name is Bonnie, and I will be your conference operator today. At this time, I would like to welcome everyone to the CA APM Global User Community Webcast. All lines have been placed on mute to prevent any background noise. After the speaker's remarks, there will be a question-and-answer session. If you would like to ask a question during this time, simply press star, then the number 1 on your telephone keypad. If you would like to withdraw your question, press the pound key. Thank you. Mr. Gagan, you may begin your conference.
Thank you, Bonnie. And hello, everyone, and welcome to the CA APM Global User Community Webcast. My name is Jean-Pierre Gagan, JP. I want to tell everyone also about coming activities that we have on the calendar for the rest of the year. So we have more webcasts scheduled. Next month, on September 20th, also a Thursday, we'll talk about, we'll have APM users, including Keith Palmer and Hiko Davis and the CA also, talk about EPA agents. Next, the following month, on October 18th, we have a webcast on APM Studio and Name Formatter by CA Andreas Rice. And then to finish the year, just before Thanksgiving, the webcast on November 15th will be on APM Cloud Monitor. I also want to remind everyone to use the QA link as an option, QA option to ask your questions, and you'll see the link on the webcast page here. With that, I'd like to introduce our speaker for today, who is going to tell us about APM release 9.1 and subsequent release, and present some of the customer enhancements part of this APM release. So Andrew Yeung is going to present. Andrew is the APM product manager at CA. So Andrew.
Thank you very much, JP. Good afternoon and possibly good evening to some of you. My name is Andrew Yeung. I am one of the product managers on the team from CA APM, and my primary focus has really been more around the Interscope side of things. It's a privilege to be invited to talk to you guys at the customer community today. I know there's been this community has been flourishing, and it's been very, very, very successful with the amount of traffic in the community, so we're really happy about that. But what I wanted to talk about today is some of the enhancements that we've added to APM 9.1, as well as subsequently just this past June, what we've added to APM 9.1.1. For those of you who attend these webcasts regularly, you may recall several months back, probably more than several months back, we did talk about APM 9.1 already, but that was really more focused on the marquee features that we delivered with APM 9.1. And I kind of want to take a different perspective today with APM 9.1 and talk a little bit more about some of the smaller, more notable customer enhancements that we've actually implemented in that particular release. And timing-wise, in kind of looking back at the abstract that was created for this webcast, we wanted to go deeper dive into the enhancements that were added to 9.1, but at the same time, timing-wise, we actually delivered 9.1.1 subsequently after that. So there were some enhancements added to that as well, most notably the integrations with CA APM Cloud Monitor and CA Lisa. So I'm going to go through in some detail about those areas as well. And it's good to know when we start getting to Cloud Monitor that you guys have some plans to talk about Cloud Monitor within the community as well later this year. So I think that this will give you at least some introduction of some of the things that we are working together with the Cloud Monitor team to bring these two solutions together. And then I'll end with some notes about some upcoming patches that we do recommend our customers to uptake, and this is specific to our 9.1 and 9.1.1 releases. So I'll end with that set of information. And just to warn you guys up front. When we did this morning, the session did go a little long. I do have a pretty full deck that I did want to present in terms of content, and I did want to show a few demos as well if I have an opportunity to do that. So I'll try to get through as much as I can, and I may skip a few things here or there, mainly due to time. But if there's interest to drill down further in a particular area, we can certainly engage those separately, either in a different webcast or some other forum if we needed to do that. So let's get started with just a brief recap of what we actually delivered in APM 9.1. And what I really want to when I talk about quickly recap, I really just want to recap on the first couple of things that are actually listed here in terms of what was delivered as key features together with 9.1. The first is around infrastructure visibility with respect to network, data center, virtual systems, and physical systems. In APM 9.1, we leveraging integration with other solutions, primarily with infrastructure management solutions, we're able to visualize the dependencies of the application that you're monitoring with the underlying infrastructure, whether that's physical servers or the virtualization layer or the network or databases. One of the areas that we provide that visualization is on the Application Triage Map, and subsequently we also introduced a location map that actually ties and correlates the physical and virtual systems supporting those applications. That part of the integration is done through our integration through Catalyst, if any of you are familiar with the integration platform from CA. And by leveraging this integration, we not only build the correlation between the application layer to the systems layer, but if there are things that are events that are being produced by those infrastructure management products, we can also pull those into our visualization. On the network side, we have integrated with application delivery analysis so that you could triage down to the network, drill down from a defective business transaction to understand from a network perspective if the network is actually causing a problem, and even be able to inspect and analyze the network session through TCP/IP and network packets for that. And also with the integration with Performance Center, there are dashboards where we surface up APM relevant metrics to Performance Center, so the status of the applications, business services, business transactions, and have the ability to drill down from those defective transactions to the client network and the network and the server response performance. So the whole idea here is being able to tie, applications, transactions, being able to tie the applications, the software layer to the underlying physical and virtual infrastructure and the network and the bases and the databases, so that as a user of Interscope, you have context of what's going on in the infrastructure while you're triaging certain performance or availability issues with respect to the application. So those were the key features that we call marquee features in APM 9.1. Now that wasn't the only thing that we built out, right? There are a number of other things like some improvements on the triage map, some management improvements on the enterprise manager, some improvements around the agent, and so I'm going to drill down in a little bit more detail in this next session when we talk about the notable customer enhancements. So the first thing that I want to drill down into is around the application triage map. For those of you who have been on APM 9.0, the triage map was one of those visualizations that we added since that particular release, and that helps discover and tie a logical relationship between the transactions and the front end and the call back end that you're actually monitoring. And what we did in the subsequent release in 9.1 was to improve upon the coverage of that application triage map. So one of the things that we added was around the customer experience metrics for the application triage map. So we, in integrating together with customer experience CEM, we've always had the tie-in to the real-time transaction metrics through APM 9.0. In this 9.1 release, we've tied and correlated that type of information onto the visualization on the application triage map. Similarly, when we look at the software components, the front ends that the transactions actually traverse across within the stack, we're also now tie in key sets of resource metrics, and these are listed here: the CPU, the memory, the thread pool metrics, the JWT connection pool metrics, and these are the metrics that we currently gather through our platform monitors, and also possibly through the application server, via JMX or for web server via PMI. And these are metrics that we already collect, but now you have the option to configure these metrics to show up and be correlated to the front end on the visualization on the triage map as well. So now you have the ability to see, hey, this is how my transactions are performing. These are the front end and callback ends that it calls out to, and at the same time understand, hey, the underlying resources in terms of the JVM resources or the CPU or the memory resources, how those are performing in relation to the performance that you're actually seeing on the application, as well as ultimately how all of this impact the customer, the end user from a client perspective. And of course, with the drill down to the location map, as I mentioned earlier, even beyond the set of resource metrics, you can now also see the relationship to the underlying physical and virtual layer if you have that integration enabled. We also improved upon the alert builder for the triage map. From a usability perspective, this is much simpler to enable and define alert thresholds for different components of the application triage map. It's a different experience from how you define the alerts when you create those in the management modules, and it's a lot more straightforward to actually do that straight from the triage map. And of course, because the triage map itself is a visualization that is automatically discovered, that provides the relationships between all of these various different components, we've had customers who liked this initial visualization, but also wanted to decorate additional information around that, contextually, of course. And so we now added the capability to be able to add the triage map visualizations onto a dashboard, and I'll show an example of that, where all the interactivity of the triage map is maintained, but at the same time, you also have the additional components of the dashboard that you can actually decorate around that triage map view. And around the threshold indicator, that's again really more around usability. Most of our existing type views and the trend charts really only display metric trends. On the triage map, what we've added now are not only the metric trends, but also a visualization on the threshold. So as you're actually monitoring these trends, you can easily view if they've reached threshold at any point in time, as opposed to looking at the stoplights on your dashboard. So I want to switch over now a little bit into our .NET agent. I'm not certain how many of you are actually exposed to our .NET agent. I know a number of you, by looking at the attendee list, are actually users of our .NET agent. But for some of you who have prior experience to our older versions of the agent, Interscope 7 or 8 or even 9.0, I think we know and we acknowledge that installing and deploying the agent itself has been troublesome. And it has been especially troublesome in some of the more newer versions of Windows Server, like Windows Server 2008 and Windows Server 2008 R2. So what we've done in this release is we've actually repackaged and we rewrote the installer to an install shield-based installer, which is more compatible with the Windows Server platforms when you actually run the installers. So there's also a lot more leniency with respect to the permissions that are required for the .NET processes to access the directories and the extensions that it requires in the agent subdirectories. And we also added a dual-bit mode install. So the installer now, if you install a 64-bit .NET agent, it would also lay down a 32-bit library for that, so that you'll be able to monitor both 32-bit and 64-bit applications that are deployed on the same box. Similar to some of the complexity that we took out of the deployment process for the .NET agent, we've also simplified the deployment for the agent extensions to monitor .NET Web Services and also WCF. And primarily, the pain points that some of our customers have experienced has been more so around WCF, where in previous versions of the agent, there's been a lot of manual process to deploy DLLs into the GAC and have to manually mess around with web configs and machine configs, which are fairly complex XML files and very error prone. And so now in the 9.1 version of the agent, we're actually deploying these as very standard agent extensions. So we drop in the library in the agent directory, and they're able to pick up the relevant WCF metrics as they are defined. And then with respect to a common theme around trying to improve usability with respect to how users actually triage and diagnose problems, we also added dynamic instrumentation for .NET. We added dynamic instrumentation capabilities, graphical dynamic instrumentation capabilities to Java in the prior release. And in this release, we were able to create a similar feature for .NET. There are some subtle differences between the two technology stacks, and for .NET specifically, it's very dependent on the types of features that we're reliant upon with the CLR profiler that we use. And so we're working very closely with Microsoft to continue to enhance that set of APIs to help us provide even more dynamic capabilities for dynamic instrumentation going forward. .NET 4 support, we've actually supported .NET 4 since our 9.05 release. We've actually phrased that back then as compatibility mode for .NET 4. And what that really meant at that time was, we can instrument, .NET 4 using a 9.05 agent. But there were, certain newer features that were not available to be instrumented because the CLR profiler that we used for that version didn't support those newer features of .NET 4. So in 9.1, the .NET agent does implement the latest interfaces of the CLR profiling API, and so we're able to actually capture and support all the features that come with .NET 4, including what I list down here as in-process side-by-side, where you have a single process, running process that starts at multiple versions of the CLR. And then we've done some work to optimize the .NET agent. We know, perfmon, our perfmon collection algorithm in prior releases were troublesome, mainly because even though the perfmon metrics were box-wide, we would query a perfmon metrics for every single instance of the agent, which was really unnecessary. And so we've externalized this perfmon collection to a completely separate service, so it actually starts up its own instance of the agent, and all of the perfmon metrics are listed under that particular node. We've also done some work to optimize the startup of the agent, so we're able to actually streamline it and lessen the amount of startup time that's required for an application that's running with a .NET agent. Now, on the Enterprise Manager side, I don't know if many of you who have actually started using 9.1 or 9.1.1 have actually seen this APM Status Console. But this was also another feature that we built out, based on a number of customer feedback, based on some of the challenges that many customers have today with respect to getting active feedback around the health of the Enterprise Manager and its cluster of different collectors. So we've implemented a new visualization, which I'll actually show in just a second here in a screenshot, but it provides a visualization, first of all, of the topology of the APM clusters. So a mom of the cluster and its relationship to the various different collectors. So you kind of know firsthand for that particular cluster that you're actually in, what are all the different collectors that are involved, where they're actually hosted, and also an indication of how basically the health status of each of those different collectors. And by health status, these indicators are really driven from a couple of different things. The first is the clamp statuses. We've had customers telling us, we've had a lot of different ways to control the amount of data that actually goes to the Enterprise Manager, and we have clamps that are set in place. But then at the same time, even though they know the clamps are set in place, they also don't know when things actually hit the clamp. And if so, they kind of want some feedback around that. So on that UI, we also provide an update of any types of clamps that have been hit, so that they'll be able to show up on that UI. And then there are these standard Enterprise Manager events around the hardware duration, the CPU usage of the Enterprise Manager, the Smart Store health and behavior. Those are also available to be configured with certain thresholds, so that as those metrics generate events as they breach those thresholds, you'll also get an indicator of that on the Status Console for the Enterprise Manager. And so all of these clamps and events are available in this APM events threshold config file. And of course, because this is really more of an Enterprise Manager admin type of activity, we do provide access control via this APM Status Console permission. So customers would need either this permission or have full admin permission to the Enterprise Manager to be able to access this feature. Also on the APM Status Console is the agent controllability. This is really around better managing the manageability and controllability of what a number of customers have actually called rogue agents. If you take a scenario where you have this entire production Enterprise Manager cluster, and some odd development team out there has a standard Java agent that they know that they can connect to an Enterprise Manager at any time, it's really easy for them to just get the IP and just connect to send data to the Enterprise Manager when you really don't want them to. So this agent controllability feature actually provides the ability to control that and basically exclude, or you basically create an exclude or include list for these agents for the type of collectors that you want to be able to access. And all of this is provided in the load balancing.xml, and there are a few examples here on this particular slide where you specify the agent regular expressions, so any agents that match this particular agent regular expression will be allowed to connect to these Enterprise Managers. The flip side to that is if you really want a particular set of agents to not or never connect to a particular collector, you can specify that in an exclude list as well. So to kind of show you what this really looks like, for those of you who have actually not seen it, This is the UI that the status console actually opens up if you have the permissions to actually access it. So on the top left, you have, again, a depiction of the MOM itself and the different collectors that it's actually connecting to and collecting all of that information from monitoring applications. And then it also gives you an indication of the collector health. In this case, this is a red status, and that red status can mean that there are events that the enterprise manager has actually detected based on the different enterprise manager metrics and the thresholds that have been defined for that. And so those types of events would show up here, and if the EM administrator notices these types of events, then you can start taking the proper course of action to prevent any further problems with the enterprise manager or the collector. The active clamps here, this is a list of the clamps, as I mentioned, that have been hit. In this case, for this particular clamp, the threshold was actually set at 500, but the value is at 94,000. So obviously, things are being clamped, and so if the user in Interscope actually questions, why you're not actually seeing the expected list of metrics, there is a reason why, and you now have a good reason visually to know that, hey, it's because this has actually been clamped. And then here's a list of the denied agents. So as agents are actually listed in the exclude list from either a collector or an enterprise manager, this would show up here if they're actually trying to access. So you have more control over the ability to provide them access or just really leave them out and never connect them to begin with. We've also added a number of what I call Java diagnostics tools. One is the GC monitor, a second one is a thread dump generator. A number of you are probably familiar with our GC monitor that comes that some of our field gurus, I call them, have actually developed. And so it's been actually one of the more popular field extensions that's actually out there. And so we decided to build that feature out of the box. And so this is a capability that's available as you install the 9.1 version of Interscope, and specifically this comes with the agent, and it's actually enabled by default. And you don't need separate extensions for different types of JVM, so this single extension does support both Sun and IBM JVMs. And so you're able to use this to be able to monitor, things like the heap usage, how it's actually performing as garbage collection is actually performed. A lot of different types of information specific to the garbage collection. More than just the basic heap usage that we have with the standard GC heap metric. It does come not just with its metrics, but there's also an overview type view. So there is a more standard out-of-the-box experience as you access this information. It gives you an overview of what's actually going on in the underlying VM in terms of its heap. The thread dump generator allows you to issue remote command to generate a thread dump. And this has also been a fairly popular request because as there are issues that actually require collection of a thread dump, oftentimes your application support teams don't necessarily have the right access to those boxes to actually issue a thread dump or a kill-3 command or something or another. So we added this capability to Interscope. Well, first of all, you actually don't have to be on the box to actually collect a thread dump. And second of all, you can actually issue that without requiring that set of permissions to actually generate that thread dump. It does collect your thread ID, the state, either a wait state or a running state, as well as the stack trace. You can also save these thread dumps and also compare them across different versions. And so this also has access rights on the enterprise manager itself to allow whether or not you have the ability to actually issue remote thread dumps. So we have set that up with the thread dump permissions if you do actually want to collect those thread dumps. And then on the integration side, we added the integration with, well, we packaged. I call this really more of a packaged type of an integration because with what we're calling the Database Performance Management Lite, this is a version of the Insight DPM solution that comes from CA, but we're packaging some of their agents to provide more performance metrics, a better understanding of database performance together with APM. So customers of APM and Interscope can download these database performance management agents at no additional cost. And it'll be able to monitor databases remotely, whether it's Oracle, SQL Server, DB2, or Sybase, and it has the set of versions that are listed out there. And you'll also be able to see the relevant metrics visualized on out-of-the-box dashboard that we packaged with this integration as well. So you see a lot more than just your standard JDBC or SQL calls that you do with our SQL agent, but you also see an underlying database performance. What's perhaps a top SQL on that particular Oracle database, or perhaps what's the buffer cache hit ratio, or how is the buffer cache hit ratio performing over time, and if that is possibly a source of a problem with application performance. This gives you really that additional visibility down to the database level that traditionally only database administrators actually had. Now, this doesn't give you ability to actually manage the database, because that's really not what we're all about. And if you really want some additional DBA type tool sets, that would certainly require the full-blown version of CA Insight Database Management solution. So I do want to switch gears a little here, and I'll hope to share my desktop if it's not running too slowly, and show you just a quick whirlwind of some of the things that I had just talked about to give you a better idea of what these enhancements actually look like. And by giving you this general idea of what we've added here, hopefully you'll have the opportunity to kind of perhaps, if you haven't upgraded yet, perhaps take a look at that and play around on your own environment as well. So the first thing that I'm showing here is a view of our Application Triage Map. This is version 9.1, but we really didn't add anything between those two versions. In 9.0, what you really only saw was the business transaction, the front end, a web service, and ultimately its call backend. What we've added here, as I mentioned a few slides back, is a notion of the impact to the end user, the customer. And this is denoted by this particular icon. Internally, our UI designers, we call this icon Kenny to refer to an actual user. So Kenny here, based on his metrics, his RTTM metrics, the defect metrics that we're actually monitoring through CEM, he seems to be okay right now because he's all green. But there could likely be a problem down here with one of these front ends, or perhaps it's called back end, which could potentially be a source of risk that could eventually affect Kenny himself. So this now gives you a more comprehensive view, so that we now have an indication of how the customer's experience actually is versus the transaction as it starts to as it actually receives that request from our through the application server in the data center, and then from that source of the transaction down to the individual front end and the back end as it's actually traversing across. I also mentioned earlier we had this notion of the resource metrics. So if you click on this particular icon here, you'll see these little trapezoids that start to show up. And these are what we call resource metrics. And so these are an indication, based on the platform monitor metrics, and, the CPU and the memory usage on that particular box, and also the JVM resources, things like the thread pools and the JDBC connection pools. And so, you can set up alerts just like you can set up alerts for any other component on this triage map. So this would give you that additional indication of possible risk if this turns red that could possibly affect performance of this application that's deployed on this particular box. And if that turns red, that could ultimately affect the performance of this transaction, ultimately affecting that end user. So we now have a more comprehensive view from the end user to the transaction to the application software components and also the underlying resources that it relies on. Now, this is not where we stop with the application triage map. We've added these capabilities in 9.1, but we want to continue to add more features that would be useful for you guys. So, we do want our customers to continue to adopt this feature. So, in our next few releases, we do have plans to continue to improve coverage of the triage map, also to improve the usability of the triage map. So if you guys have specific requirements or have feedback around that, we would certainly love to hear that. What are some of the things that currently hinder you from finding this particular feature useful? We'd definitely like to hear about that from a product management perspective. All these components I mentioned earlier, you can define alerts for those. And it's much easier to define alerts for these now as opposed to actually going down into the management modules and define those. It's a matter of selecting the appropriate metric and defining the threshold values and then just enabling it. So very, very straightforward. And then you can actually also in real time show the alert details if you want to actually check on a particular alert status for a particular node on this triage map. So it's meant to be informative to give you more information about what's going on in this particular visualization. On the on the console dashboard itself as well, I mentioned that we now have the ability to add the triage map to the dashboard. So this is an example of that. So there's actually, through the dashboard editor, you can actually add a source for the triage map, and you'll notice that all the interaction for the triage map on the console dashboard view is all relevant as well. So again, to be able to provide the right amount of visibility, it might not just be the triage map that you really want, but you might want to add some additional context around it, and building a dashboard around this is a perfect way to actually do that. Let's quickly switch over to this metric browser, and I'll just give you a quick look at this thread dump generator and also the GC monitor. So here, if you go to this thread dump type view here, very simple. If you want to collect a new thread dump, you just issue that one command when you click on this button, and it'll generate the thread dump and give you all the different threads that are running right now. Their states, if you wanted to sort them by states, you can see, hey, what's waiting or what's running, and then the actual method that thread is actually in right now as it's actually running or waiting. So it gives you a simple way to get a bird's eye view as to that particular process that you're monitoring and the underlying threads as they're actually running in the system. Now, that said, you can save and you can load this view and compare them, through different snapshots. But one thing that I do want to mention here is it's not a standard save format, so it's not something that you would import into a different thread dump analyzer, so to speak. But it's just really relevant for what we present on here on the Intrascope page. And then on the GC monitor side, here's the new node under the GC monitor. So we do have the type view that gives you an initial indication of of what's going on with respect to the heap, the different algorithms that are actually implementing the garbage collection, and the type of metrics that are being measured within the JVM itself. And so you can obviously, drill down to the individual algorithms and actually look at the metric trends themselves if you actually wanted to do that. So this gives you a lot of information, much more than what we previously provided with the GC heap itself, to be able to give you an understanding of what's going on with the garbage collection. So what I want to do now is to switch back to the presentation mode, and let's move forward with
Andrew, there were a couple of questions that came in through the Q&A session.
Okay.
You want to take them now or wait for the end?
I can take a quick look at this right now.
One is from Juraj asking, what about JRocket?
Okay, that's a good question. That's for the. I assume that question is for the GC monitor. Right now we support Sun and IBM JVM. JRocket is on the backlog as an enhancement request. So we do need to work on it. It's not available yet.
All right, thank you. And then Luke was asking, wanted to ask if the Insight Lite feature uses the DCC for Insight agent setup.
As far as I know, it does. I'm not the full expert on that integration, but I believe that part of the deployment really hasn't changed.
Thank you.
Sure. So I have another 15 minutes, and as I mentioned earlier, I'm likely going to take up all 15 minutes, unfortunately. I apologize for that. But we did also have a subsequent enhancement-based service pack release back in June that I did want to talk a little bit about. You'll see here, there were a lot of different enhancements that were added here. There was also a number of different expanded coverage for platforms. But what I want to drill down here is really the first two, the APM Cloud Monitor and the CA Lisa integration. So those are really the bigger ones that I'm closest to. For APM Cloud Monitor, for those of you who actually haven't seen APM Cloud Monitor, it is basically synthetics, and you can issue synthetics sourced from a JMeter script. We call it. You can create a JMeter script and call that a monitor and deploy that monitor in APM Cloud Monitor, and that particular script can be issued from very different geographical locations across the globe. So this helps solve different use cases. The first is the 3 a.m. problem. How do you understand if the application that you're monitoring at 3 a.m. in the morning, if it's with no load on the system, if it's actually up or down or even performing according to what you expect it to actually be doing. So synthetics can actually help you solve that problem. The second is around geographical understanding of your end user experience. So, based on various different dependencies, a user in Egypt could have significant different experience from a user from Texas, as you would expect. So, having different locations issuing these synthetics helps give you a better understanding of, hey, why there is such a difference geographically, and perhaps the problem is really down to either the ISP or the network that is a source of a problem for your customer's experience. And a third is being able to manage your third-party vendor SLAs. A lot of organizations are starting to deploy bits on the cloud. Maybe you deploy something on Amazon EC2, or you have a third-party vendor that's actually hosting a particular service for you, and you don't have a good means to actually install an agent and have that Interscope agent talk to your enterprise manager. So Cloud Monitor can actually access that by hitting their URLs or their web services via synthetics, and then through our integration we can get that information in and drop that into our Smart Store to give you an indication of how your third-party services are actually performing. So when the integration was initially created, it was actually developed as a field pack. And it was a very popular field pack that was out there late last year, and we decided to build this feature into the product. So what we actually bring in are the set of Cloud Monitor metrics, and I don't have a means to open up Cloud Monitor right now, and perhaps in one of the future webcasts where you actually talk about Cloud Monitor, you'll have a deeper dive on that itself. But the standard type of metrics that we do collect from Cloud Monitor, we can bring this information into Intrascope, so you now have a more comprehensive view of how your application is performing, how your agents are monitoring them, and also via synthetics, you also have an indication of how things are actually performing. And as these metrics are collected within Smart Store, they're just basic metrics that you have, so you can do anything that you want, build out-of-the-box dashboards, or specify alerts from them, etc. And the way we do this is really through Cloud Monitor's REST-based API. It's very, very extensive. It's very well documented, and it really gives us a simple way to extract this information out to APM. So that was a quick overview of our integration with APM Cloud Monitor. I did also want to introduce you guys to our integration with CA Lisa. For those of you who are not familiar with CA Lisa, this came through our acquisition from ITKO, and the primary solution that they provide is what we call service virtualization. And this is primarily within your dev or QA labs. You can resolve your constraints on dependent systems like a back-end mainframe or web service or database upfront early in the life cycle, so that you can optimize how you're actually developing and testing your solutions. And so they do this by being able to mock their dependent systems, so they're able to mock traffic to a back-end database and mock traffic to a back-end mainframe. But what they actually require is information on how to build this model, and that's really what service virtualization is all about. And again, perhaps in one of the future webcasts, we can drill down a little bit more with some of the CA Lisa product managers exactly how this works. But if you think about how best to build a model in a dev or a test lab, well, the most accurate information that you have is going to be from production. And, APM is already in production, so we should be able to get some of that information from APM and use that as a basis or input for building that model in a pre-production lab. So the first set of information that we are providing them is really based on this a particular integration, as you see on this screen. So we do collect performance metrics, let's say response time metrics, for example, for a back-end web service, and developers or QA testers want to build a model in pre-prod that has an accurate sync time that represents that particular web service. So they can query this response time metric through our Enterprise Manager and our web service interface, and take that as input to CA Lisa, and then that input would be used to be able to build a relevant model with production type response times. So this is available since Lisa 6.06. We also demoed this in CA World last year, and to give you an idea of how this actually works, you can imagine here, this is a screenshot of CA Lisa and its workstation. As they're actually defining their virtual service, they want to determine, what is the actual sync time that they actually need to input here to develop an accurate model for a web service that they're actually dependent upon. And so through this integration, they have what they call a VSE companion. And the VAC companion has one set of data source that they can query from, and that is the Wiley data source. And as they query this Wiley data source, you'll now see a more familiar interface here where you can specify the web service URL to access our Interscope web service, and then the regular expression to match the agent and also the underlying performance metric that they really care about. In this case, is the average response time. And so then they can query these spot response times, say for at 2 p.m. in the afternoon on payday, if you're bankofamerica.com and you want to understand, what the overall response time is during payday as people are transferring dollars across different accounts. So you can use that as your when you want to observe that data and capture that response time. And then once you capture that response time, it gets inputted into CA Lisa as that sync time to generate a relevant model. So that's the first step that we're doing to capture production information into CA Lisa. There's a lot more that needs to be done over the next couple of releases, including a more statistical distribution of these metrics to provide a more relevant model that can be built out, as well as also a more transactional type of integration, so that as customers are accessing a bankofamerica.com, for example, as different front end and back end are traversed across from a business transaction, that transaction path can be brought over to CA Lisa to be able to have them build out an accurate model that represents that transaction path from front end calling out to the underlying software components, eventually out to a back end, a call back end. So now that you've actually captured this relevant set of production data into CA Lisa, you've created a model that your developers and your testers can actually use. Well, what about providing information back to APM as you're actually testing, creating performance or load tests in a pre-production lab? So Lisa does have a means to create load tests, or there is a Lisa test solution. And so we now have a closed-loop integration where Lisa can publish test case metrics, and we have an agent that can actually, we basically have a tracer through an agent that can collect these test case metrics and then write these into smart stores. So if you have a pre-production application that you're actually monitoring for a performance lab, we now have the test events coming in from CA Lisa, and you can correlate that to the performance metrics that you're collecting through Interscope for the system that's under test. And this helps you realize or address issues up front earlier in the life cycle before you actually hit and throw it over the wall to pre-production. So the types of metric that we do provide or collect from CA Lisa are the responses per interval, the average response times of the test itself, the running tests, the virtual users that are running, and the failed responses. So this is an interesting use case for us to be able to, we know a lot of customers actually do use Interscope upfront earlier in the life cycle, but this not only gives an indication of how things are actually performing in the life cycle, but it gives you that correlation or the context of the test that's being run as you're actually collecting those performance metrics to help you remediate any problems up front. And this also helps give information around capacity planning. For example, if you're running a particular load test and you ramp up from 50 users to 100 users, and you now see that as you ramp up 50 users to 100 users, how that actually impacts an application front end, you can now use that information to understand that, hey, before you deploy this into production, if you anticipate more users on Black Friday, for example, or Cyber Monday after Thanksgiving, you can more adequately plan how you actually want to deploy these applications under those scenarios. So those are the two main things around integrations that we added to APM 9.1.1. We do have a number of other enhancements that were added to that service pack release, including cross-process transaction trace between Java and CTG, .NET agent communication to the EM through HTTP tunneling, not just a regular TCP Isengard channel. You can now have the agent connect to the EM over HTTP and HTTPS. We have the ability to identify synthetic transactions, and this is especially useful for customers who actually use our WTG feature that also issues synthetic. Based on the header of what the request is actually coming in as, in Interscope, you can now separate those backend transactions as you view them so that you know which ones are actually coming in from a synthetic user versus the real user. We've also enhanced the Interscope SQL agent to be able to better handle some of the queries and the JDBC connect strings specific to Oracle RAC, and also upped our historical metric limit to 5 million. So we're at the top of the hour, but I really did want to put this last slide up here. I covered a lot of ground today. Unfortunately, there's actually more stuff on the deck that I skimmed over that I wanted to get to. Hopefully, we'll have another opportunity down the road to talk about some of these in a little more detail. I probably glossed over some of these things a little too quickly, but what's really important about this particular slide I'm putting up here is that we do have a couple of patches that are coming out. One is APM 9.1.1, targeted for the end of August 2012, and so that's really coming up in a couple weeks. 2 to 3 weeks, it should be available and posted on support.ca.com, as well as 9.1.0.4, and that's targeted for the end of September. So I know there are some customers out there who are already on 9.1, and there are some customers thinking about upgrading to 9.1. These patches include some pretty critical fixes, including an agent memory leak fix that's in there. So we do recommend that you do uptake that patch. And for that particular issue with the agent memory leak, there has been a technical advisory that has been published and is posted on CA support.ca.com. If you do want to access it and get the details about that, it's under our product page on support.ca.com, and there's a list of technical advisories that we published historically, and the latest one is on this particular issue. And it does address the patches that are coming out and also an interim workaround if that's the best course of action that you think you need to take. So with that, I've gone somewhat beyond my allotted time. At this time, I'll open up the line for questions, and I'll also start taking a look at the QA section on the list.
Thank you, Andrew.
So the first question here, I guess, is really what I just talked about on this slide. The first question on the Q&A panel is, we have been warned that there are memory leak issues with the 9.1 agent. Does that apply to APM 9.1.1? Yeah, the agent architecture between 9.1 and 9.1.1, they are the same. And they are a new agent architecture that we introduced in 9.1. So they do have the same problem. And the fixes are in the patches that I list here on this slide. So we do recommend that you do get hold of those patches when you have the opportunity to, when they become available. Second question here is this presentation deck available for us via email? My assumption here is yes. I need to work out some of the logistics with respect to how I want to scrub some of the content. I didn't actually cover all the content on the deck today, so I'm going to scrub some of that out, and then I'll work with the community team and see what best is appropriate for us to post directly either on the community or via email.
Thank you, Andrew.
The next question was, there was an issue with 9.1 with high CPU utilization on Windows Server 2008 R2. Is this fix available in 9.1.1? So I will be honest here, and I'm actually not aware of which specific issue this is. So it's something that I'll have to take back and work with support and our level 2 sustaining engineering to see which issue this is actually tied to and where the fix actually is. So hopefully, Sachin, if you're describing this problem, that there has already been a support ticket that's been opened, and we can get more details about that as I follow up on that issue. Are there any other questions on the line?
Bonnie, can you prompt the community for questions?
At this time, I would like to remind everyone, in order to ask a question, press star, then the number 1 on your telephone keypad. We'll pause for just a moment to compile the Q&A roster. Again, to ask a question, press star 1. At this time, there are no questions.
Okay. Thank you, Bonnie. I mean, I guess, I did use up pretty much all the hour. I apologize if I didn't give enough time for questions. Actually, I did
There's one more coming from Sri.
From Sri. The thread dump tool, is it not supported on JRocket? The thread dump tool should work across all JVMs, so I'm pretty sure that is supported. Okay, so, well, again, thank you very much for the opportunity for giving product management a chance to update our customer community on some of the things that we've done. We do have other releases that we're working on right now. I know in our previous webcast, Scott Williamson did talk about engaging in our customer validation program. So I did want to put out another plug out there. So we love getting your feedback, good or bad, and we do want to be closer to our customers. So we do really relish these opportunities to talk to you guys directly over a webcast. So thank you very much for the time. I guess I'll hand it off to JP or Mary.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you all for participating. I think that concludes our webcast for today. And again, I'd like to remind you of our next webcast. We'll see you there in September 20th for a presentation on EP agents by APM users. Thank you.
Thank you. This concludes today's conference call. You may now disconnect.